The idea of this workshop is to work and learn together across the boundaries that usually separate us. So we're trying to work across those things and say, for this day today, let's try and work together and see if we can help and learn together.
There are a number of people in the room from mental health, disability associations, fetal alcohol support organizations, parents, social workers who work in adoption, and people like me who work for an organization that is interested in this issue, and researchers. And to put all of these people in the same room rarely ever happens. And it's really, really important when you have the cross collaboration of this kind of a group, the richness of the information that comes out.
For anyone from the adoption area, whether you're a parent or you work in the area, you know that there's been huge transformations in adoptions in recent decades. I used to work in adoptions and I don't recognize what's happening now at all. And what happens now is that more parents are finding that they are raising children with special needs. And I'm saying finding because they don't always know that when they go in. These special needs are often complex. They're not always fully known or fully understood initially. And so some parents are not necessarily prepared for the challenges that they're going to be facing. They may be prepared for challenges, but not the particular ones that they end up facing 4 years later. And there's some evidence that satisfaction does decrease over time.
People that parent children with disabilities really do parent in isolation, right? I have a biological son with no special needs. Parenting him was a lot easier than my two little guys, right? And it's hard. You just do what you have to do on a daily basis, right? But you really end up doing it in isolation.
We adopted a little boy in 1972 who was described as all boy. And we had lots and lots of difficulties with him. I felt that he's more than all boy. And eventually they thought he might have ADD or something like that. But you know, he's now in his 40s, and we think probably was an undiagnosed FAS. I mean, that's really what it likely was. We just didn't know back in those days. And in those days, as an adoption social worker, I shudder to think about some of the children that I actually placed without adequate information because we didn't know.
Special needs adoptions involve children who have conditions, circumstances, or a history which make them hard to place and parent. Special needs can be of two main types, which can coexist.
One of them is biobehavioral, so that's prenatal substance exposure, alcohol or drugs, disabilities of a whole range of types, medical conditions, behavioral or emotional disorders, so it's still quite broad. And then environmental, which is mainly a history of abuse, neglect, or multiple placements.
We're particularly interested in this workshop on FAS, autism spectrum disorders, and ADHD. But we also have to keep in mind that disabilities include mental disorders. Persons can have autism and also have a mental health issue. More and more I realize that people just don't have one disability. They often have associated disabilities.
I think one of the things that came out really strongly is that adoptive parents get some pre-adoption training that's very, very good. But soon as they take the child into their home, that parenting advice stops, and they seem to be left on their own.
While there are many gaps in the literature, especially in Canada, research from the past decade reveals more post-adoption issues, increased need for supports, and the risk of adoption breakdown before and after legalization.
The early research looked particularly at the immediate post-placement period. So the period before the adoption was finalized. And one of the things they found is that there were not a lot of post-adoption supports unless there was really a risk of breakdown. And I have a quote here from a landmark Canadian study by Cohen and Westhuse. And they said, it's almost as if there was a myth that once the child is placed, or a belief, he or she magically becomes a different person and the family does not need any kind of support. That's 1990. We're 2012. How much has that changed? So that's something that you can think about today.